Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm going to do a quick review of the Shirogorov NeOn Zero Frag. Before we get into it, please subscribe, please follow the Instagram and the Facebook page. Thank you very much. Alright, so this is the only full-on non-American blade I own. There's other ones that are American companies but are made where their manufacturing facilities are overseas, but this is the only one that I have that is fully non-American. So Shirogorov is Russian, so it's not Chinese or anything like that. It's Russian made. It is not custom, so it's all so you got your custom pieces, and then you got your I can't think of it. Production. This is still technically a production knife, but Shirogorov is probably, if not the best production manufacturer out there. The only one that might be close is Koenig, but all the other ones that are close, I mean, the one that's probably the closest American made would be Hinder. The other ones that I would mention are more custom or mid-techs that are better or at the same level. So those don't really kind of count when it comes to production. But one thing that everybody says is Shirogorovs are very, very smooth. And I do agree. This, as you can tell, that is extraordinarily smooth. It's like more of a controlled drop shot. It's not gonna like be a guillotine or anything like that, but it's very, very smooth. A NeOn Zero, size-wise, is kind of in a weird spot because this is basically their version of every company has their model where they do the very best they can at getting it a 50-50 dimensions. So a 50-50 shot when it comes to dimensions. So this is close. This is very, very close. You're looking at basically a 1-inch difference. Obviously, I'm going to kind of do some measurements with this guy here in a second. But let's first do some size comparisons. So let's just do the Rat 1. So as you can tell, overall length, the Rat 1 is quite a bit bigger. But blade length, they're basically identical. So the handle on the Rat 1 is much larger, and also has less cutting edge than the Shiro. Next, we're going to do another dimension marvel or something that's another knife that's showing off dimensions. This is how close you can get to a 50-50 ratio blade to handle. And these two are probably one of the best size comparisons you're going to get. I guess just kind of look at that. The handles are the same length. The blades are nearly the same length. So this is like, if you want to know the size of a NeOn, this is pretty darn accurate to the same size lengthwise. Obviously this way it's going to be a little bit different. The NeOn Zero is a little bit taller in most areas, if not really every area. So that is the difference. But the NeOn Zero is very thin. It's thinner than the 940. Barely. And what's interesting about weight, speaking of weight, this guy is about 2.5 ounces, give or take. This is 3 ounces. The weight is very similar. But what's interesting is this is carbon fiber, and this is titanium. Now we'll get into those specifics in a bit, but let's continue to go up. We're gonna go down in price ever so slightly. Now again, handle. The Shaman is definitely quite a bit bigger on the handle, noticeably, as you can tell with that gap. The blades are similar in length. The NeOn is actually a little bit longer of a blade, and a lot more sharpened blade on top of that. And let's do 2 more. This guy is a very good size comparison, because get the same blade length, but the handle on this is a little, on the XM18 3.5 inch is a little bit longer, and to be precise, it's a 1/4 inch longer, because most Hinders are going to be 1.25 inch longer handles than there are blades throughout all of their lineup, where this one is just 1 inch longer than the blade. And last but not least, it's going to be your Strider S&G, which is going to have a similar thing right here. The handle is longer. The blade is the same length. What you're going to notice about here is this is an S&G frag pattern, so it has the same pattern on it as this NeOn Zero. So, looks. We're going to just, obviously, not just on top of being super smooth, there's every little detail is thought through. Like, the frag pattern is grippy but not aggressive. The jimping here on the backspacer is grippy but not aggressive. Every detail, or like the space for the lanyard loop doesn't hinder the pocket clip, but when you go in, it has a recess into it. That way it's easier to get it in and out. If you look at that right there, I'll show you why this way the backspacer is here matters, if this will focus. Maybe someday. Yeah, a little lip. There we go. Yeah, well, and this right here, this little tiny cutout is also very important. I also do like how the stop pin is definitely oversized for the size of the blade, but that's always welcome. Oversized hardware is, rather than being too small and being more likely to break, that is much needed. The one thing that people will have against Shiro is their hardware, where you have to buy their tool, or you have to get a flathead that fits that, which you can obviously do, but depends if you want to risk marking up or not. That's up to you. And also, look at the flipper tab too. The cutouts there, it's on the jimping being just the right amount of grip without being too rough. And then speaking of that gap, I can show you. There you go. See, it's just right at the edge. There's very little difference between that gap right there and the handle. Same here. The only thing is, I do like when blades take this part all the way over here. Like if you look at the 940, there's no weird gap there. Where here there is. That's more of a pet peeve. Everybody's a little bit different. Now, why is this so light? Is because there's a lot of milling, and you can actually see that here. Let's see if I can get a better angle. There's even milling. Let's get a flashlight, see if I can. There you go. There's milling there. And there's, let's see if I can show you. Ooh. It's really hard to, there you go. It's very aggressively milled. That's, and even the backspacer back there, you can see it's divoted out for the blade. You see it back down there too. There's as much milling in the handle as you possibly can, with also still having a functional and durable blade. And speaking of blade, so this is gonna be tumbled. The handle here is tumbled. Trying to remember all the specific things about this guy here, but yeah, the handle's tumbled, just tumbled, where the blade is bead blasted and then lightly tumbled. That's where you kind of get a contrast. The blade is a slightly different shade than the handle, and same with the hardware. The hardware is slightly different shade than the handle. So it's not completely uniform, but it's still, so the blade and the handle, everything pops, but also goes together very well. Some people will like that, some people will not. As you can tell there with the flipping, yes, it does have that issue because it is so precise. Is if you have your finger here when flipping, it's gonna be very hard to flip out. Now, you can definitely just get used to it. One way I've gotten used to it is putting my fingers mainly on the pocket clip, and then it fires every time. At first, thinking about it, you have to make sure over and over and over, you have to think about it. But then after a while, it kind of becomes a habit. Again, with that, how the flipper is milled on the edges, rounded off, nicely done. Same with the top, very nicely done. Jimping on the top, again, aggressive, not aggressive, useful, but not too aggressive. The grind on the blade is extraordinarily well done. Not full flat, obviously, as you can tell, but from very top goes all the way down and is very thin behind the edge. This is a great slicer. And as like all my blades, I use this over and over and over pretty much every day before I do a review for testing. Now this is one I will not pry with because the tip is not gonna be able to take that. You're gonna break your tip, and so I don't even try with this one. I know better because there are other things I can use to pry. If I don't have a pry bar on me, a flathead screwdriver. But regardless, this is not one to pry with. It will cut all day, every day. Speaking of that, it is M390, so it is going to cut for a long time, and that's a perfect blade steel for this. M390 alternated edge, great. Because although it is chippier, so it's not great for super hard use, but this guy is not meant for hard use. It's meant for long, extended cutting, and it will excel at that. So it's a good steel, a great steel fitting for it. Now you definitely want to keep up on sharpening this rather than letting it go dull. Just kind of strop it and keep it sharp. Not difficult at all. I'm trying to think. I don't know if there's any, like, obviously the pocket clip has decent amount of room in there. The only issue you can say is that right there is very close to the lock bar, so that can cause issues depending on some of your pants, but that won't come off up too much. It is definitely a small point that actually goes in contact with your pants, so it is going to be more likely to tear your pants over time, especially with the frag pattern. But I mean, it's not the end of the world. There are ones that I have that are going to do that way quicker than this guy. Long-term effect, it's not that big of a deal. It's not really an issue, but it's something to keep in mind. And also something to keep in mind for a production knife. Most of the production knives I have, the highest one that I have is going to be the XM18 3.5 inch, expensive wise. This is probably the most expensive one I own. That's a production, that's not a Shiro. And this has been I've heavily added to it. I've added everything to it. Completely switch out everything to be completely black, so it is going to be a little bit more expensive than the Shiro. But even this starts at, well, because it's a battle black, it starts at like $365, around that area. But most hinders this size start at, so not 3, so 465, sorry. Most of them start at 425. This guy is on the $700 range. That's gonna obviously turn a lot of people off from it. Understandable. That's pushing it a little bit. I wouldn't ask for any more. Not a chance. There's a lot going for it. It is a beautifully smooth, beautiful knife. A lot of attention to detail. If not, like the best attention to detail out there. But this is the only concern I have. You can tell that it's very close. I can with my finger touch that. That's really not an issue unless you're flipping. The only time it can become an issue is if you flip and then go back down and then do it. It's unlikely. It is a possibility. Even going in your pants, it is unlikely to actually, your hand to actually get in there and caught. It is a little worrying. It's not necessarily a huge issue. It's just something to keep in mind. Yeah, it's very unlikely to cut you, but it is a possibility. Even trying to, I can't, but they are definitely pushing that limit of how thin the handle can be to how wide the blade can be. They're definitely pushing the dimensions as much as possible, which is what this is supposed to do. Now, I wouldn't pay this $700 for the normal one. The normal one is actually just plain titanium on both sides, very plain, not very unique, kind of boring to be honest. Then you have ones that have carbon fiber here instead of titanium, which is definitely more calm for that price. It's better. It's something I would be okay with spending that amount of money, but this one I actually wanted to, just because it's unique. There's a lot more work that goes into these titanium scales in the first place, which is definitely makes spending that much make more sense. If you're looking for a blade that is the best of the best, that is non-American, I honestly, and this size is what you're looking for, I definitely would consider this. I would definitely look for a more unique one just to make sure you get your money's worth. But maybe that's just me. So size of blade, speaking of size, we're looking at 3, this actually guy is sorry. We got 3.5. And 3.5 inches of cutting edge. Now some spots like monkey edge measure from the beginning of the flipper tab, and so they have it as 3 3/4. So here's the thing. Do keep that in mind. It is absolutely without a doubt a 3.5-inch blade and a pretty great package. You're getting 3.5 inches of blade with 4.5 inches of handle. That is really good dimensions. It's really hard to beat that, and to have a 3.5-inch blade under or right at 3 inches is also hard to do, especially with titanium. But yeah, if for whatever reason the cop doesn't like you, they could measure down here and get you past about 3 3/4. So if they really, for whatever reason, didn't like you and there was a 3.5-inch law, which there are here and there, they could be picky and definitely measure it where you break that law, but unlikely. Do keep that in mind. But overall, I will say the NeOn Zero Frag is definitely a highly recommended blade overall. It is pricey, keep that in mind. I would not spend that money on the normal plain Jane one. I would get something unique if I were you. But this is definitely a keeper and 100% staying in my collection. But that is going to be it for this one. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.